I still remember the feeling of being frozen in place, watching strangers pass me and move to the end of the line. I remember the feeling of butterflies in my stomach and the shortness of my breath as I watched it towering above me. I remember my brothers standing next to me saying things like, "Emma, it's so fun, we promise. It's not that bad. You just have to go on it." But their comments fell on deaf ears as the sheer terror inside me stopped me from moving to the back of the line. This is what I experienced back in 2019 when me and my family visited Lagoon in the fall. Now, I was faced with the choice of whether I was going to go on Cannibal. The roller coaster Cannibal in Lagoon was built in 2015, and since its construction had been my greatest irrational fear. This thing terrified me, and every time my family would talk about going to Lagoon, the inevitable question from my dad and brothers, "Emma, are you just gonna get over your fear for once and go on Cannibal?" Cannibal terrified me. What are you afraid of? Everyone is afraid of something, whether it's an irrational fear like fear of the dark or a survival-based fear like fear of lightning. But everyone is afraid of something. How our bodies react to fear starts in the brain, in the amygdala. The amygdala handles the emotion of fear, then sends signals throughout the rest of your body, preparing you to physically react to fear. You might have heard of the phrase, a fight or flight response. This is the gut instinct we all have when faced with fear to either attack it or flee from it. This is based on survival instincts in all of us and is why in a life-threatening or terrifying situation, our adrenaline can get us to do physical feats that we couldn't do otherwise. Fear is a very natural human emotion that we all experience to some extent daily, but the extent to which I feared Cannibal was completely unnatural and debilitating to me. I lost sleep over this roller coaster. Just thinking about it in my bed, I would feel my heart rate start to slowly speed up, and I would have to work to move my mind to anything else to calm me down so I could fall asleep. It got to the point where I subconsciously would not say the word Lagoon out loud. Like saying Macbeth in a theater, I thought if I said the L word, some curse would fall upon me. This one dumb roller coaster was a debilitating fear that stuck with me for years. But going into and thinking about fear and how people experience it is harder to do when talking about irrational fears because they're different for everyone. Not everyone is afraid of a roller coaster or the dark or clowns or whatever it may be for anyone. So what is everyone afraid of? Or to phrase the question differently, what are things, scary, intimidating things that we will all have to face at some point in our lives? Well, a ballpark answer to this question can be found in an article posted by the Odyssey online with the caption, 7 things adults fear the most. The list says things like financial struggles, big life decisions, loneliness, not being able to fulfill hopes or dreams for life, losing loved ones, aging, and parenting are on the list. Now, while this list may not be 100% accurate, it gives us a good general idea of what the real fears are that we will have to face in life. Now, thinking about this list compared to my example of my irrational fear of Cannibal, the 2 biggest differences that I can find in these 2 fears. Number 1, the most obvious one, is that this list of real fears are much bigger and more important than an irrational fear. Obviously, subjects like death, relationships, career paths will mean more to us down the road in our lives than going on a roller coaster ever could. And number 2, the biggest difference between these 2 is Cannibal isn't going anywhere, and it's not going to disappear. I mean, really, when I stop and think about it, my decision of whether or not to go on Cannibal never really mattered because no matter what I chose, it would always be there at our next Lagoon trip and the next and the next. It will be there as long as Lagoon is open as an amusement park. However, things like relationships, starting a family, our education decisions, some of the biggest choices that we will make in life won't always look the same for us, and they won't last forever. What can last is the regret that we could feel if we don't face these fears, or at least learn to deal and live with them. PreciousLife.com posted an article in 2017 with 15 stories of anonymous women who had gone through at least one abortion. And they talked about the feelings that they had years after going through the procedure. And as I've read these tragic stories from these women, they recounted that when they heard the news of their pregnancy, their initial reaction was feeling incapable of taking on the mantle of parenthood. And they said that they felt like it was too scary of a task to go through with. But the most common comment made by all of these women who shared their stories was sharing the crushing regret they felt years after making this decision, making statements basically saying if they could take it back, they would. If we let fear determine and tell us what we are capable of and what we can and can't do, the outcome can be life-altering in some cases and can lead to us having regrets for years. Now, how can we turn fear from something debilitating to something useful and something that we can actually get through? Well, an article posted in the Smithsonian Magazine in 2017 talking about the science of fear and how people experience it and deal with it differently, I think lays it out pretty clearly. The author of the article, their closing remarks, to paraphrase, they talk about how the connecting link between the different ways that people experience fear is our sense of control. When we let fear tell us what we can and can't do, and when we aren't able to step back and recognize what is real and isn't, we give away our sense of control. But in reverse, if we are able to step back and recognize what fears are real and what fears we're heightening and over dramatizing, then we do have that emotional sense of control of the fear in our lives. Now, situations where we are faced with stressful decisions and quick reactions, in these situations, our immediate instinct won't be to step back and look at it logically and realistically. And it is not easy to think this way. But as we train our brains to try and recognize in the fears in our lives what is and is not real, we will see the fruits in our labors in seeing what we can overcome and what fears we can conquer. And the scarier it is, the more rewarding it will be to face. On October 15th of this year, I conquered my fear. I conquered cannibal. And I could go into the emotional saga that I experienced as I waited in line, as I approached the carts, as I felt the lap bar close on my legs, and as I was raised up in the 208-foot tower that the ride begins with. But I'll just say this. Stepping off of that roller coaster, I haven't felt that elated and that proud of myself in a long time. And I would hope that we can feel similarly as we face our daily fears. And I hope that we can feel similar as we conquer our personal cannibals. Thank you.